So I read a lot. Building a support network was extremely important.
Hey guys, I'm AJ
I'm Rooney.
and welcome to TFA Talkshow. Today with us we have Gus, and he is the founder of EAT Launchpad, a one-stop digital platform for aspiring entrepreneurs and startups. Welcome, Gus.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Maybe you can share with us a bit more about what you do.
Sure. So let me put it this way. So everybody's talking about startups. Even universities, governments, the media, it's just becoming a very hot topic today. But becoming a startup founder is actually really hard. In fact, as you know, 95% of startups fail, and especially most of them don't survive past the first year. So it's very close to heart. When I first quit my corporate job, I was a banker for 12 years, all the way up to 2016. And when I left the banking industry, I've always wanted to start my own business. I come from a family of entrepreneurs for quite a number of generations, but I myself had no idea how to start a business.
Right.
So I, started Googling, read through all of the information I could find, talked to a couple of people, even found myself a few mentors. And, everything that I could find was about other people, what other people have done and what people have failed, what other people have succeeded. But what I really needed was something or somebody that was able to give me guidance on the goal and to continue to capture where are some of the areas that I might get stuck. And so with that, I just kind of there was not a single platform that I could go to find an answer like that. So so we set off on a mission since 2018 to build a one-stop digital platform like what you mentioned. And it was targeted for, and it is still targeted for aspiring entrepreneurs and startups. So what the system does is it continuously gathers data on the background while our users engage on it. So the more the users use it, the better it's able to understand where the teams are maybe stuck. And with all of that data, it essentially predicts some potential points of failure and essentially recommends them what are the next steps. So it could be, read this. There are a lot of stupid mistakes that founders do that could easily be answered by reading articles and Googling, but, many people don't Google, right? They don't look for answers. And so, the system automatically, proactively recommends them what to read. And if they don't act on it, then essentially it begins to recommend who they can talk to and etc. So, it's just like next steps of avoiding failures. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So you mentioned you were from a corporate job. So what actually made you switch from banking to entrepreneurship? I mean, what's your trigger?
Well, without wood, there would be no fire, right? And I would say that it's been piling up over the
Right.
years. Back in 2015, 2016, I was extremely frustrated at the sort of corporate rat race. And I found myself checking into work, the Monday blues and all of that.
Right.
And I was just like, I could do so much more. I think it all goes back to um, my parents immigrated to Brazil when I was really young, and they had no background in anything. Like they didn't have any background in finance. They didn't know how to put together a business. They didn't speak Spanish or Brazilian Portuguese. But they built, over the course of like 10 to 12 years, they built a really good business that even sent my sister and I to go study overseas.
Right.
And I looked at myself back in 2015, and I was like, what am I doing? Like I speak so many languages, and I knew finance. I've worked for banks by then over 10 years.
Wow.
And why was I working for other people when I could go out there and solve a bigger problem?
Right.
And that was essentially the initial trigger to the, to that fire in my belly to say, okay, I gotta step out of this comfort zone.
Right.
Otherwise, I'm just gonna be trapped here. And by then, I was kind of like my age. I wasn't young anymore. I was getting close to like past 35, and I was thinking like, if I don't get out now, when else am I gonna get out?
Yeah.
Okay. So because you came from a corporate job and then you jumped right into the entrepreneurship, what were your fears when starting your business?
So many. So I had no idea what I was doing. I would be lying here that if I were to tell you that, I had my shit together and I know what, the next steps are. In reality, little did I know, what I thought was the right budget, right?
Right.
I was thinking like budgeted myself for like 6 months, for 8 months. But you always under budget, you always under plan.
Mm.
And I think back then, what I just, like I said, I was reading and looking at information that was about other people, but there was no right formula. And looking back, I would say that there was nothing really, because everybody is in a unique journey, right? I always
Right.
make this
Right.
example about that we are all, the geeky side of me takes Star Wars as one of the examples. So you've got Han Solo, and he's in his own journey to find his father.
Mm.
And we're kind of all in our own journey to discover what it is that we want to achieve in our lives. Entrepreneurship is very much like that. Like it's hard for me, even today, having advised so many founders, I would say that I never say like, this is the right path or the right formula,
Right.
because there's
Mm.
just isn't one. Everyone discovers what is it that they want to achieve on their journey to fail, as they fail more and as they find what works for them.
Right. Okay. So then how do you actually overcome your fears and challenges? Like when you first start up, that kind of thing. Yeah.
I would say that, I mean, I came from a industry and a background that made it very comfortable for me in
Right.
life, right? As a
Mm.
banker, I was a banker for about 12 years,
Mm.
and income was good and everything. The biggest fear wasn't that that would run out of money or I would
Mm.
end up in a gutter somewhere. Um, the fear was that it built over time. So
Right.
initially, I started with like, it's fine,
Mm.
I'm okay, there's money in the bank account and I've got a
Yeah.
house and all of that. But then fear began to build up 6 months, 8 months, and when you start
Mm.
realizing that there's no more income, and reality sinks in, right? And you realize that 12 months later you still have no more income,
Mm.
16 months later you still have no more income, and that is when you start to panic. And the
Mm.
psychological fear, I would
Right.
say, I mean, there were many other risk factors and many other considerations that would have taken in place, but I feel like for most founders, the
Mm.
psychological dealing with your psychological challenges is with yourself. The conversation that you have in your head,
Mm.
it's far more challenging than the actual real challenges that you are facing in physical challenges that you face in the real life.
Right. So I mean, like, do you like read books or what do you do?
So I
Yeah.
read a lot. Building a support network was extremely important.
Mm. Yes.
One thing that I do with many of the first-time founders today is to look
Mm.
at, what kind of people have I sort of surrounded myself with.
Right.
There is a saying that you are the combined average of the 5 people that
Yep.
you surround yourself with. So one example would be, tangible example was when I first left the first 6 months. I was still in my, banking group
Mm.
and, all of these people. So going to like champagne brunches and
Right.
Mm.
spending 300-400 a weekend, it was a very normal sort of lifestyle.
Mm.
Mm.
But then, fast forward 8 months, 12 months, you can't surround yourself with that kind of group of
Yes.
people because it's a constant reminder of what you left behind.
Mm.
Now, my entire objective and risk factor has completely shifted. So I can't continue. And so I found myself having to detach myself from
Mm.
what used to work
Right.
and
Mm.
rebuild that environment that I was with. So I found myself, so I literally, I mean, for those that know me, I packed my entire life into 2 bags and I took a one ticket flight to California
Wow.
and told myself that I wasn't going to come back to Singapore unless I've built something that I was, more comfortable in taking it to
Mm.
the next level.
Mm.
And when I ended up in California, I found myself talking to like 24-year-olds, 18-year-olds, people that really inspired me,
Mm.
people that had no because of the circumstances of their life, they were forced into being entrepreneurs.
Right.
So we're talking about, parents who've divorced in
Yeah.
when they were 16-year-olds. So they weren't given the proper opportunity to go to university. And so they couldn't really achieve higher education. And so many of them ended up becoming entrepreneurs because of circumstances.
Right.
And by the time I met them, some of them were like 25, 26, but they were on to build their sixth or seventh startup.
Wow.
And yeah, and they were like in the third exit
Wow.
at 25. They were,
Wow.
one of them was like had millions in the bank account because of how early he's begun. And I wish, as somebody who was like, I mean, compared to him, I was like a millennial, right? He was like
Yeah.
Gen Z.
Mm.
And I wish I had gone into started my businesses and learned this, how to start my things much earlier than he did.
Yeah. True.
Right.
So it's inspiring to be surrounded with younger people who started much earlier in life than, in the entrepreneurship journey.
But then at the point of time when you realize, were there any form of regrets, or were you still like, you feel that this is your path despite the age gap and whatsoever? How was your thought back then?
So one thing I learned is never, age is just a number. And I know this is like kind of like, it's very loosely used and everybody overuse it, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't really realize the true application of it until I went to the US and I was hanging around like 18-year-olds. And as a 36, 37, back then, hanging around with like some 18-year-old, I'm just like, I mean, what could I learn from them? But then I don't know, I think culturally from the entrepreneurship ecosystem, it's just being around Europe. I travel around Europe and US and some parts of like Central America, and what I found was that they actually are a lot more risk taker.
Right.
They knew far more about how to put together a business than some 60-year-old that has been enslaving themselves in like big corporate. Now, I know like at this point, most of the listeners will probably think that I'm here. It's like us against them. It's not, right? There's a lot that could be learned with the corporate guys.
Yes.
But I just find that just because you've had like 30 years in a particular industry expertise, it doesn't mean that they can build something from scratch. And one thing that I've learned about from these guys that started really from scratch is the ability to survive and to build resilience.
Yes.
In spite of whatever market, like whatever was happening in the economy, it did not apply to these guys because they've survived through so many challenges and reinvented themselves so many times that it's like a cockroach. You can't kill them. It's like whatever it happens in the economy, it doesn't really apply to them. They're very, very resilient.
Wow, cockroach.
I don't know why, but
yeah, I describe myself as a cockroach. Like I could be, I'm
we are all
on the lookout.
cockroaches.
we all cockroaches, even though I don't like them, but okay.
But yeah, we're survivors, like it's just like you don't die, you thrive in the in chaos. And that is what in an environment where things are are messy and are dirty and hard to grasp, right? I use that. It may not be the best example, but I'm just like trying to think of an animal of a being that survives no matter what kind of environment. And I think cockroaches
know, right?
are
I can totally see where this is going. Okay, because you mentioned about like how we have to thrive in chaos and stuff like that. Because for us, we represent mostly freelancers, and we can totally relate to like how entrepreneurs their lifestyle or their way of things, right? And because we understand that when it's a business, you'll be working in a team. So what's it like to work in a team? Because most of us like freelancers, we're usually working solo.
Let me just clarify. When I left banking, I was a freelancer for a good 1 year and a half. I didn't play the traditional startup game. So what would be the traditional startup game? Take startup founders today. It's you go around with an idea and a pitch deck, and you share your idea with like 100 people, and you hope that one of them is gonna believe in you, right? And then put money in you. And then when you raise enough money, so technically you haven't really created any value at that point until you've had raised money. one thing that I appreciated, and I still stand with what I did when I left. I didn't believe in that model.
Right.
I believe in the model where you experiment, you get your hands dirty, you provide service, you create value first. And that's one thing that I really appreciate about freelancers is that, there's a lot of hands-on and a lot of skills put into value creation, even though you don't have anything or everybody backing you. You've got yourself, or maybe like your friend, right?
Yeah.
Two people, two, three people coming together. Uh, but one of the biggest challenges as a freelancer back then was that how do I scale? So while
Yeah.
I used to go around and provide advisory and talk about finance, coming from finance, how do you budget yourself? How do you find financial sustainability and resilience within yourself as a startup? And that was what I found a lot of, like, a very niche market that many people didn't do, because everybody was like talking about businesses, they were talking about digital marketing, talking about all of that, but financial sustainability and resilience there weren't many people back then talking about it. And I found that through going there I couldn't scale.
Right.
It was just me, myself, and I, right? So my time, at my peak, I found I was servicing about 14 founders, working from 7 to midnight and non-stop for 3 months. And it was a point in time when if I didn't change my model, this system would crash. And essentially, by 2018, I flew back to Singapore, and I had an idea of, like, because I've always come from tech background, and my degree is in tech and mathematics. So I've always wanted to do what I did, but tech, because using a system on a platform and data, if I could use it to my advantage, then we could essentially replicate this at much bigger scale.
Right.
So by 2018, we came back and I proposed the AI system to the ESG grants, the Singapore government, and essentially we got our initial small sort of starting fund. I mean, you can't even call it pre-seed round because it was so small, but it was enough to get us started. And that is one of the things that I really appreciate about having started this business in Singapore, because of the funding. I don't think I would have been able to even start that idea, kick roll the process if it was in other parts of the world. I think the traditional tech model, like tech startup model, works if you're in America or in Europe, right? Because you go around with a pitch deck and they invest in, but in Asia it's very hard. Investors are much more conservative. They're more they want to see tangible stuff before they give you money. So I'm having the government to be able to stimulate that right at the beginning, it helped, like, as a recipient of one of those businesses, of those grants, I that is what worked for us. I can't say that it works for everybody. I've also met founders that said, why should I waste time doing that when I can really go and raise a big round from the investors? And they are right. I mean, there's no right or wrong model. For me, it worked to be a freelancer first, convince the government with a little bit of money, and then hire our first tech guys and essentially start building our technology. And today we're a team of 9 people, which we still depend a lot on government subsidies and some of the government grants that are available out there.
So now that you have a team of 9, what's your advice to freelancers who are thinking of starting their own business? It could be someone who actually are currently right now having corporate job and wants to go into freelancing, or it could be someone who is already a freelancer and wants to scale up their business like yourself. Maybe like a team
So
of
I
9.
see that as 2 parts. Okay, the first part is somebody with a corporate job wanting to come into freelancing. I would say totally do it. And the reason why I would say that is this: if you've been working for a big company like myself, I was working with some of the bigger banks, Citibank, HSBC, UOB. I've always had that brand behind me, and you wouldn't understand what are the risk and the courage that are required, and skills for that matter, when the brand is no longer behind you, when you're by yourself, and you are, and you won't be able to know that because a lot of people that are under the bank, under the big companies, they suffer from overconfidence. They feel that they attribute a lot to their own skill and capabilities, even though they've jumped around different corporates, but they don't realize that they still rely on that big name. Once you strip away the name and you abide just yourself, then you find that there's a lot of advisors and consultants that are struggling out there in the market, until they discover their ability to create a business model that works for them as a freelancer. And when you achieve that, then you can truly say that you are a freelancer. Before that, you find yourself still kind of trying to get customers, trying to get people to convince you, and all the brand that used to be behind you is your past life. It would not work for you. It's very hard to convince that. The second part, which is more to do with freelancers, should they scale, should they go into tech? I would say that there are different methodologies that are out there, and read up about them. So there's something called the lean startup methodology that allows you to take what you do very well as a freelancer and then look at the different type of and ideate the different type of solutions for the customers that you're servicing right now. So one reason why a lot of customers are engaging freelancers like us in the past, right, is because they had a need, and they had pains that they needed to solve, except that they didn't want to hire us in full time. They just wanted to outsource these. So essentially, what would make sense is to look at technology solutions, or at least put together technology solutions that would be able to continue replicate that similar, or at least innovate in that space to create what we call today the startup model. So startups essentially build something that is profitable, scalable, and continuous.
Thank you guys for sharing. I think it's amazing to know that from a corporate job to freelance, and you actually took the freelancing model before you actually went to scale your business. So could you share with our viewers and listeners how can they connect with you?
Yeah, so we have a community group on Telegram. And so for those that are thinking about doing a startup or fostering some kind of partnership or collaboration, you can find us, which is EAT Launchpad community. So is E for England, A for Asia, and T for Thailand community. Another way would be you can email me directly or look us up on our website. So the website is eatlaunchpad.com. So EAT Launchpad, LAUNCHPAD.com. And our contact is over there. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn as well. My name is Gustavo Liu. I don't think that many Asian people with a Spanish name. So Gustavo is GUSTAVO. Last name is Liu.
Thank you so much, guys, for being on board with us. And for those who are watching and listening, if you do like our content, do follow us on our social media platform on YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, Telegram, LinkedIn, as well as Facebook at the Freelancers Academy. And we'll see you there.